welcome back. We are live again, and today we're going to be talking about something super duper awesome. I want to talk a little bit about the style guide, which means the color schemes that we're going to be using, all of the different images that we're using, what the aesthetic is. Style guides are really important because sometimes when you're showing off your first draft to your client, sometimes when you're showing off the first images and the first views of what your first UI is going to look like to the client, it gets really important to just put your point across visually, and you can't just go to the client and say, I'm using the font Pixelify Sans. Your client wouldn't understand that. So in the very beginning, obviously you need to have a lot of visuals into the way you're building things out. So this is the process. This is really important for freelancers. This is really important with your first client and also your second and third and fourth and fifth and every other client. So this is just the most basic stuff ever. So if for example, this was the only image the client gave you, the style guide for this project would be as follows. Let's just go through that. The first thing with style guides is colors. So this is our color palette. Let's just talk about the color palette that we have. We are not using black in this color palette, which is awesome. We are working with a primarily dark mode first color scheme, which is also awesome. And we're going to be working with a lot of pure white and orange here. So the colors that we're using, let's just get it from this color picker right here, is 0001D, or in RGB you're going to get 00029 100%, and this is the bluish black that we're using. So this is what we're using instead of our plain pure black, and that just sets the theme for the dark mode that this UI is going to sort of stay around. That's its territory now. This is the next orange that we're using. This is the bold highlight, which is just singing, screaming as soon as you enter the page. And then this is our white. So these are the colors that we're using for this UI. Let's just get that very, very clearly across. Let's also talk about the fonts that we're using, because that is also a very, very interesting thing to look at. The fonts are obviously Pixelify Sans, which is for our titles, and also Outfit. So Outfit is going to be our description font, but it gets really important for us to say that this is the fonts that I'm going to be using, so that there isn't a lot of deviation from what we've previously decided. And also we want this to be a little bit smaller than our title font, just so we know what we're working with. Alright, so this is our fonts. Let's just underline this just so we have a clear difference between what we're building out and what the titles are. And we also have the colors over here. So this is our style guide. This is the very first time I'm doing a style guide on this channel, but this is just really important when you're building out your very first project. Like, you can't escape this at all. When you're giving your first presentation to your client, having all of these things ready is going to be very, very important. Now that we have our color and now that we have our font, we're going to also talk about our images and aesthetics. So for some UIs, you usually want your illustrations to be dominant. For some UIs, you want these stock images to be there. So some UIs, they have their own photographers. That will also come to you at some point. But for this UI, we're just taking the UI that we're just taking this image that the client has given us, and we're sort of building on top of that. So I feel like it's really important to get that clearly across as well. Let's just copy and paste this, and we're going to talk about images now. Images. So the images that we're using are actually, for this site, quite limited. Usually your client will provide you with the images that they're working with, because you are not the photographer. You don't have to come up with the images unless they are illustrations and you're an illustrator, but that's something for a different day. That's just a different story altogether. Alright, so these are the 5 images that we're working with. The point that we are trying to make here is, once you give these images, once you give this style guide as a single file of handoff to your UI UX designer, now they don't need to worry about what illustrations do I use. Do I go to Unsplash? Do I go to Pixabay? Do I go to Leonardo.ai? Where do I go? They don't need to. UI designers now don't need to worry about that, because we know these are the images that we're going to be using. So this is our style guide for this real world project that I'm building out, and this is going to be as close to real world as you can get before you get your first client. So this is just very, very clear preparation for your first project. And the reason I'm just getting, a lot of designers in their style guides don't put images, but I like to have at least 1 or 2 images of what I'm working with, because I found myself searching for hours and hours on sites like Unsplash and Pixabay, weird images and illustrations, and then they don't fit together, and then that's a different problem altogether. You want all of your images to be of a pattern. So you want, if you're using illustrations, you want all of them to be illustrations. If you're using images, you want all of them to be images. If this is the sort of image layout that you're using, you want all of them to be specifically images. So it's really important to be clear on what images you're going to be using, not deviate from that a whole lot. Let's keep this clear. So now we have all of our images. So we have our colors with us, we have our fonts with us, and we also have our images with us. What other things, now I'm thinking about what other things do I need to have in my style guide before I actually get to designing. So I feel like the color theme here is going to be this. I also feel like it's necessary to say here it's going to be dark mode primary, because sometimes you can just get confused with, I have a black and I have a white. Do I put the background for the very first section for the whole site to be white, or do I put it to be black? And in that case, it's just really easy for us to go from dark mode primary and just build off of the dark mode theme. Mix of Design says the masterclass looks interesting. However, I couldn't find the timing details on the page. Could you please share the schedule? Of course I could. Of course I could. Look at me. I'm promoting my own thing. The masterclass happens 2nd March Sunday. Time is 5 to 8 p.m. Indian Standard Time, or 11:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, depending on wherever you are. So I hope that answers your question. Look at me. I'm promoting my own thing. Sounds so cheesy. Anyways, this is our color guide for the project that we're building out. We're going to get dark mode primary. This is our color palette. These are our fonts. These are our images. And I don't think you need a whole lot from this point on. This file of style guide in itself is just enough to build off of, right? This is just enough. You could give this to an actual person and that would be fine. Made it this far. Thank you so much for watching. I have a bunch of other super cool tutorials left and right of this video, or maybe on the left or maybe on the right. I really don't know at this point, but I really hope you enjoyed this. This is actually the way I would go about building a style guide for a real world project. So I hope this gives you the inspiration and experience you need to get started on your freelancing journey or your UI UX design job journey. Do let me know what you think in the comments. My social media is down below, and also I'm really happy to answer any questions you might have. Until then, subscribe, like this video, and I'll see you in the next one.